Welcome back to another sci-fi episode where we're going to continue to examine how we think, feel, and behave with money. And this being part 3 of our cognitive behavioral series when it comes to financial management, we're going to think even more about how we're thinking. And I know that sounds silly, but if you listen to part 1 and part 2, it makes sense. And I was just sharing with Carolyn White, our EAP program manager here at Redstone Arsenal Employee Assistance Program. I had my own cognitive distortion about this podcast series because I was thinking, oh no, I'm giving the audience all this information. They're left hanging. Okay, Olivia, now I have this information. What do I do with it? Yes, I have identified what cognitive distortion I have. Now what do I do with it? And just like a good therapist would, Carolyn reminded me that the spacing between the podcasts mimic a counseling session.
Absolutely.
And so tell me about that.
I mean, it's just like I would have someone in my office. We're going to start with understanding and awareness. If we don't know what's going on with the behaviors, how are we going to even know what we're changing?
Exactly.
And then in your next episode, we actually have to recognize. And that recognition is a lot of acceptance. So what distortions do I have? What distortions am I willing, which is a really key word when we're looking at behavior change. What am I willing to do? What am I willing to acknowledge? What am I willing to recognize? And so hopefully as people have been listening to the podcast, they're doing that. They are recognizing, hey, these are my distortions. Now, what am I willing to do about it? Because everything that you're going to talk about today, if they're not willing, it's not going to be effective. They're not going to actually be able to make the sustainable change that I think most of your audience is looking for.
That's right. And that kind of goes with that acceptance and commitment therapy that is a great adjunct and works very well with cognitive behavioral techniques.
And that's my primary modality.
Yeah.
And so I work on awareness, acceptance, and action. And those are kind of the 3 pieces that I find that works for not only short-term, but long-term change.
Right. And I have to give a shout out to someone I've never met before, just attended a continuing education. Again, I was very excited as I was taking this class because just the title intrigued me of how I can incorporate this with my financial clients. And the name of the class was Applying Cognitive Behavioral Techniques to Create Sustainable Change. And as a therapist, I know that challenging or first examining, then challenging our cognitive distortions can free us of what has been holding us back. Breaking those chains, so to speak, is what has been holding us back from obtaining that financial goal that we've had for ourselves. And so this is the part where I love the most, where I'm giving psychology away. And that's what Dr. Jonah Paquette was doing in his class as well. He's a psychologist who's been working with patients with CBT and shares his work with other folks. But one of the things that I did in clinical therapy and that I continue to do in financial therapy or financial counseling is giving psychology away, telling people, this is, if you were to go see a therapist, this is most likely what you would talk about.
Absolutely, yeah.
Give it a try. And I'm not someone's clinical therapist. I'm not practicing clinical therapy as a financial counselor, but I am using solution-focused techniques. I am using mindfulness techniques, dialectical behavior techniques, cognitive behavioral techniques. Most therapists have a myriad of modalities that they're following, depending on who is in our office that day, is how we meet the client where they are. And so with this, we are examining the evidence throughout this 3rd part of this series where I'm teaching you, Carolyn's teaching you, how to truly examine the evidence of whether this cognitive distortion has merit. If it does, it's not a cognitive distortion. So that's what we're trying to figure out. It's like, and again, as I alluded to Paul's writings, holding every thought captive, what we do is I gave my 10-year-old this visual when she was dealing with some anxiety. We did some art therapy and she drew a jail cell. And I pulled out that writing from Paul on holding every thought captive. And she put all those thoughts in a little jail cell. We put handcuffs on every one of them.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, every one of you jokers are going into this jail cell until we have time to deal with you. I may only be able to investigate or interrogate one at a time.
Right.
And that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
With all of these cognitive distortions, if you have to go back and if you didn't remember which one you tend to engage in, just throw some handcuffs on it and let's get ready. Let's go to town with this. So what evidence supports this thought? What evidence refutes it? What are the facts? What do these thoughts tell us? What is that story that we start telling ourselves as a result of these cognitive distortions?
And that's the big thing, is actually being able to differentiate the story from the facts.
Right.
Because oftentimes there is a big difference between what's actually happening and what I tell myself is happening.
We are great storytellers. We can tell a story in such a way to where our brain believes we're really there. When someone asks us, oh, how was your vacation? You start talking about the beach. You start incorporating all the activities that you were doing. All of a sudden, you can smell the beach. You can smell the suntan lotion. You can smell the crisp air at the beach. Maybe sometimes it's not so crisp, but you're getting all your senses engaged. And so it becomes so real.
Yeah. And we've sprinkled in a little bit of brain science as we've been going along. And that's largely because where we process all of our sensory input is right next to where we hold on to those memories.
Right.
And so
the hippocampus.
Yes, we're gathering everything together in the same place. And so it's very easy to feel like it's real.
Right. So the olfactory region, your sense of smell, is the strongest sense tied to memory. And so that little bit of brain science can cause someone to go into a complete and utter decline.
Absolutely.
Real quick. And a lot of people refer to them as triggers, but smell is one of the bigger ones. But we're trying to help you out of these traps. So the first technique is called the semantic technique. And I don't have time to go through all that were presented, but I'm going to be presenting the ones that I've used with my financial clients and that I have found great success with. So the semantic technique is very simple. It's just semantics. You're using different words. The first thing that I tell people, it's not here in this talk, but one of the things that I first tell people is let's change the language to where this is not my depression or my anxiety. It's the depression or the anxiety. It doesn't have to be yours.
Right.
You don't have to claim it as just your thing. We start to externalize then. It's not a part of us.
Right.
Where we've internalized all those years thinking that is my depression. And we hold on to it.
Oh, absolutely.
We're hoarding it.
Yes.
And don't take it away from me, Carolyn. I have spent years babying this. So how dare you try and just take it out of my arms?
Right.
And that's the same with financial clients. I've lived a lifetime in debt.
Right.
I'm comfortable with debt. If you try to take me out of debt, I don't know how to live my life.
Absolutely.
And if you took me out of debt, now I no longer have an excuse.
And that is so key, is the excuse. How do I explain where I'm at and what I'm doing?
Right. So I will not have to, but I might be more inclined to increase my thrift savings plan contribution or 401k contribution, might finally start saving for that home. But maybe there was a fear about losing a home, why you never owned a home. Going back to that cognitive constellation that we talked about in part 1 of this series, is there was an early experience where you said, I should never own a home because this is what happens when you own a home. So we have to change the language, and it's very effective, especially for those should statements or must statements. So here's what it looks like. It's just softening the language. So you're changing the word should to something else. So instead of I should be more financially successful, I would like to be more financially successful. It takes that scolding out of it.
And there's a pressure.
Yes.
There's an expectation. And there's a bit of moral failing in there versus the second one when, yeah, that does sound like something that would be nice. And then it encourages. And that encouragement is what allows a lot more motivation toward change.
Right. And replacing the word should with value. We talk a lot about financial values.
Yeah.
One of the things that a lot of financial experts are talking about now are when you're setting goals within your financial portfolio, what value system do you have? And are you following your values? Are you placing that ladder on the right wall?
Right.
And then before you spend all that time climbing that ladder and then realizing, oh my goodness, I'm on the wrong wall.
Yeah.
You put that ladder on the right wall. And I'm borrowing that from Stephen Covey, by the way. Great author, leadership series that he has on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But back to the language, another way of putting it. So instead of saying when we're incorporating values, instead of I should be more financially successful, I value financial freedom. I value financial security. And then I would take you further to define what do those mean to you individually? Because it's going to mean something different for all of us.
Yes.
For your husband, it's finally getting that truck, Carolyn.
I know. And I will say, so for me, I value my family.
Yes.
And so part of that, and we actually talked about it last night, for his 40th birthday, that is the goal that is embedded within that value that we're working on. And so it's part of our financial plan, looking at where we're at in life and what we can manage.
Nice.
But it's a lot easier to do that actually than saying, I should be able to make this happen for him.
Right.
Which is where I often find myself.
And then there comes the personalization. I have to make this happen to make him happy, but you are not in control of anyone's happiness.
Absolutely not.
Right. Oh, I love it. See, this is good. Okay, so defining terms. So now we're still in the language department, but now you have to understand what words are, what they mean. And so when you start to define terms, you lessen the blow of these terms. So the terms that we usually use for ourselves, I'm a loser, especially in the financial world. Again, I'm a spender, and I've been pegged as that all my life, but I save so much. I have redefined, and I call myself a celebrator.
Nice.
I no longer call my husband a saver. I call him a defender. He's a defender of our financial portfolio. And because of that, and because of all the defensive structures he's put into place, including following that spend plan all those years, we have wonderful defenses set up. Should something happen to him or something happen to both of us, our kids would be well cared for. So, but I've also modeled for my girls how to be flexible and how to celebrate life while still saving.
Right.
It takes them away from that all or nothing financial thinking. Either you have it all or you have nothing. You can have this with a little bit of this and sprinkle in a little bit of this, and it's still financial freedom and financial security.
And what I'm hearing is balance. And I know that, from so many of my clients, that's what they're looking for. And it's, finding that middle ground where you can save and you can spend, you can defend, and you can celebrate. It's possible to have all those things going on at the same time.
That's a great way to put that. And it just reminded me your compassion that you have for people that I've witnessed. I'm thinking of a widow that had come in. She had lost her husband. And this is not true of just the genders. I'm not saying that only widows are having this problem. There are some widowers, but the generation that has been passing of natural causes, the baby boomers, generally speaking, the men were the breadwinners and they managed the finances. There were plenty of women, baby boomer women, who had their own careers as well, but the men handled the finances. And that's not true of every baby boomer. And I realize that. But she came in and she was talking about her generation. She said, well, in my generation, you know, our husbands did all this for us, or he paid someone to do this for us.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel so stupid. She couldn't find the designations of beneficiary. She had to hire somebody to try and find those because she needed to find some money fast to survive. And so she started calling herself stupid. And I asked her, well, what does that mean? And she started clarifying. And that's all this is, defining the term. She started defining what stupid meant. And turns out as she was defining it, she started showing herself some compassion. Oh, I'm really not stupid. I just didn't know.
Absolutely. And so many people find themselves in that exact situation.
Yes. And that's true with finances. Had I not studied finances as much as I have, there's so much I wouldn't know.
Of course. And that's where I put a shout out to all your listeners right now, recognizing that for those of you who are feeling that way, that's why you're here. You know, if you've labeled yourself that way, that's why you're here.
That's right. And they're here because they are not above learning something new as well. So getting specific, this goes into, we've relabeled terms, we've defined terms. Now we're going to get a little bit more into the weeds by getting specific. And this particularly attacks overgeneralization, where we focus on the one thing. You know, only important people have money, right? Because of my, it was such a fortunate experience to have these two lovely girls in my life. But it was such an unfortunate experience for me to not challenge the thoughts that I had in my head. And I negatively viewed all preps in high school as being unworthy, or they're more important than me, or there's more value tied to them because they have the nice clothes or they have the nice car. And by the way, I've learned over the years that, boy, was I completely wrong. That has nothing to do with happiness. So had I known when I was 16 what I know now at 44, that would have been a huge comfort. And that's where getting specific is such a comfort. Because I could have asked myself and shown myself some compassion at the age of 16. Well, Olivia, you think that only important people have money. What does an important person look like? Can you define what important person is? Can you define what having money is? Can I get specific and get into the details with those words? Oh, my life could have been different.
Absolutely.
From the age of 16 to 19 before I met my husband at 18. For those 2 years in between where I didn't know. And then I met him and he opened my eyes to the financial world. Thankfully. I think you'll get a kick out of this one. This is one of my favorite techniques, where you schedule a worry break.
I use this one all the time.
Now, do you have them journal it first, or only schedule the time, think about it, concentrate it, or do you give them options?
I give them options. It's all about, in this case, personalizing. It's figuring out what works for you as the individual who's going through the experience. I'm not a writer. So if I start journaling, I have a hard time getting out of the journaling. I do much better to sit and reflect. But I've got clients who are phenomenal when it comes to journaling, and that it really just hones what they're thinking. It really allows them to just get that sense of clarity, which is really the purpose of what they're doing.
It fits that person's temperament. Yeah. And so journaling so that's why I asked the question, because journaling will work for some. It may not work for all. Because some people are going to think of it as just another task. Whereas if I just asked you to do this, and whether you want to journal or not, you actually schedule a time, any time during the day except before bedtime. You're not allowed to do this before bedtime. For 10 to 30 minutes, you worry. You think about everything that you've been worrying about, everything that you can't control that you're worrying about, every person, everything, every detail, every money situation, every relational situation, and you just focus on that worry. Here's how it's effective because when you worry outside of that worry break, you get to gently reorient yourself or redirect yourself to, Olivia, we're going to talk about that tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Yes.
Right now at 2 a.m., it's going to keep me from getting sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So in the next couple hours, we're going to get to really hone in on that, focus on that worry, pick it apart like you like to do.
Yeah.
Go nowhere with it, but just worry.
Yeah.
When you get into that habit, it does something. And I only chose techniques that I've used and have been successful with clients. What I usually get back in a report from clients is either one, I got tired of doing it, so I just stopped doing it, and I realized how ridiculous it was.
Right.
They embarrassed themselves, and I'm not trying to shame anybody because I'm a worrywart.
Oh yeah, I personally use this.
Yes, me too, because at 2 a.m. I cannot do this.
Right.
I need my sleep. I do journal, especially with the 2 a.m. waker-uppers.
Well,
I'll write it down.
And that was going to be a nice tip with this is if you're like me and you don't journal, what I do find with this is my hack is I keep a note on my phone. And so if I'm going about my day and I'm finding that my brain just won't let go of something and I know I need to put it into my worry time, I just drop it into the note.
I love it.
And then that way it lets my brain know to relax, that it's safe.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry. I won't forget it because it's in a place that I can come back to when I've got the time set aside.
You're sending new signals to your brain that calm your body.
And I'll be honest, years later, I've gone back and found these notes and almost laughed because it was like, man, at the time, this was such a big deal. And it feels great to just delete it because I know that it's not something that's overwhelming me anymore.
And you delete it and I get to scratch it off in my journal, like, victory.
Yes.
I can't believe I worried about that. What's next? What else do I... And so it also validates for people that worry is a natural part of life.
Yes, it is.
And I never really had worry until I became a mom. Now, I'm sure if I looked back before becoming a mom, there's probably some level of lower level worry that I experienced. But like the real worry that kept me up at night, that came after having kids. And not to say that if you don't have kids, there's something wrong with you if you are a higher level worrier. But let's turn the worrier into warrior, where you get to become that warrior who gets to dictate when you think about this. That's where it becomes productive. So self-monitoring. Now, again, this is cognitive behavioral technique. And I got this from a continuing education class for my license as a professional counselor. And as I was making notes, I couldn't help myself but write down all the financial aspects of these techniques. So self-monitoring. When I work with financial clients, I always prescribe a tracking method. We have old school folks that they just want to track in their ATM deposit slips, right? Or the checking, the check register. Some people will use the old-fashioned check register. Some people will use the envelope method where it's actual physical cash. Some people, like myself, I use an app where I track my spending. So self-monitoring in the cognitive behavioral world is where you're keeping track of negative thoughts by counting each time it happens. And you get to choose how you do that. You could use the note in your smartphone. You could use an index card. You could use your check register. But tracking spending is self-monitoring.
Absolutely.
So here's the next level where I would take it. As you're tracking your spending, and on my app, or even if you have the physical envelope method, whatever negative thought is tied to that spending, write it down. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not that you have to come back and look at it. It's now that you're becoming aware of what you are assigning to that spending. It's very powerful. I can't wait to present the class with you on spending addiction in September. We're going to get into the weigh-in.
Mm-hmm.
There's a weekly weigh-in and there's a monthly weigh-in where we track spending. You're going to love it. Your mind's going to be blown. You assign the importance of what you spent your money on numerically.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that because that plays so much into a lot of my work is values-based.
Yes.
And we do the same thing with our values, is applying a numerical value. How consistently are you living this value? How important is this value actually to you? So I'm so excited.
Yeah, you're going to love it. I think the clients, and I'll definitely, for the audience here, those that aren't here at Redstone Arsenal, I'll definitely do a podcast on it after it's completed, or maybe even before, maybe as a warm-up.
Yeah, this will be a webinar, so anyone who has
can click the link
can join.
That's right. That's right. We'll make sure to put all that in the post as well. So self-monitoring. And that's what tracking spending is as well. Now, here's one of my absolute favorites. Now, audience, not everyone can do this. Okay. And this is not a trick. It's not me using reverse psychology saying, oh, not everyone can do this. Oh, she thinks I can't do this, so I'm going to show her. Or that. No, that's not what this is. But there's a favorite technique that I've used from day one with clients, paradoxical magnification.
I still remember the
where you prescribe the symptom ad nauseum. So what that looks like, instead of challenging your cognitive distortion, you just magnify it. And you say, okay, well, I'm stupid, or I've really taken this personally, or I am a financial failure, and I am embarrassed, and I should be, and I'll never get well, and I'll never be financially well, or I'll never achieve the financial freedom I've been seeking. So we just tell you to say that to yourself over and over and over again. And think about it over and over and over again. Here's what happens. You start to think, maybe I'm off. Yeah. I'm not 100% a financial failure. I am paying my rent on time.
Yeah.
I don't own the home that I want to have yet, but I am paying my rent on time. And maybe another client would say, oh, well, you know, I'm ashamed that I've lived in debt all my life. I don't know how to live without it. It's comforting. You just roll with it. Keep magnifying it. And then before you know it, this person starts to see the chinks in the armor and the holes in his case, his legal case, if he were to present this before court. Oh, my goodness. Well, I did grow up in this situation. I did have to buy this car because my wife had to travel 100 miles to go to work. And because of that mileage, we had to purchase a new car about every 7 years. And then I had to purchase my car about every 10 years. So yeah, there was a constant state of debt. And so you really start finding the chinks and the holes, and that's what assists with that. And one of the things I like too about prescribing the symptoms is sometimes you just get sick of it.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, I don't like calling myself stupid anymore.
Exactly.
I don't like referring to myself as a financial failure as much anymore because, wow, I just took a class of Olivia's and I'm feeling pretty darn good about myself now. Because she said 50% don't even have a budget, but I have a budget. I'm doing something right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful thing there. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about before we close, and Carolyn, this might be one of your favorites, especially with your primary modality being acceptance and commitment therapy, is self-compassion.
Yes.
One of my favorite things to do is the way that you're beating yourself up, the way that you're talking to yourself. If you had a kindergartner come talk to you and say, oh, I'm a financial failure. You know, mom gave me $5 and I blew it all on candy and now I have a tummy ache.
Yeah.
Would you tell that kindergartner or talk to that kindergartner the way you talk to yourself. Well, that was stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? You'll never amount to anything.
What were you thinking?
Yeah. No, you wouldn't. You'd probably go to jail. No, I'm just playing. You wouldn't do that to a kindergartner. And why wouldn't we do that to a kindergartner, Carolyn?
I mean, because we're not going to be speaking to kids who don't know.
That's right. They don't know.
They're learning.
Mm-hmm.
They're exploring. They're experimenting.
Yep.
And the reality is, even those of us who do know everything, we're still learning.
That's right.
Because we're never actually going to learn or know everything. So even when we're feeling competent and proficient and, yeah, I've got this, there's still that part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's that kindness, that self-compassion to be able to say, hey, you're never going to be everything and you're never going to know everything and you're not going to have to be perfect.
You can tell this is your primary modality. Very well said. Yeah.
I love it because this is one area that I find most people struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes up in really every aspect of our life.
There's Dr. Paquette quoted someone here, Jack Cornfield.
Mm-hmm.
If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete.
Yeah.
We show compassion and kindness to other people all day long,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully. But we rarely give it to ourselves. We rarely gift it to ourselves. So if you think about the next time you're beating yourself up, how would you tell a kindergartner to think about the situation?
Mm-hmm.
It gives you perspective. Yeah, a kindergartner is not budgeting. A kindergartner is not paying for a car. A kindergartner is not doing a lot of financial things. But it would at least give you a new lens from which to look to now steer yourself in a different direction with a different conversation. Again, the stories we tell ourselves.
Right, because the thing is, we're not expecting that of them. So it goes all the way back to those shoulds.
Yes.
What are you expecting of yourself? What are you telling yourself that you should be doing, that you could be doing, that you would be doing, when reality is, where are you right now? And can you give yourself the compassion to say, this is where you're at today. Mm-hmm. This is where you're at right now. And then celebrate, this is what you're doing. Right? You may not have achieved your goal, but what are you doing today? Mm-hmm. And what did you do yesterday? And what are you actively working on doing tomorrow? And can you celebrate? And can you give yourself a big old hug? Mm-hmm. Because you're doing it.
Right.
And that's how we create change, is we show up every single day.
Yeah. You're going to work every day and you're learning something new every day. Mm-hmm. And that's so true. We can't know everything. It is humanly impossible and we will make mistakes. Even the most educated financial experts have had investments go wrong.
Yeah.
Everyone will have some level of financial distress because of a good financial decision.
Right.
We are not foolproof. There will be moments where we wish we hadn't done something, but we made the best decision at the time with the information that we had. And so I'll leave our audience with this. As I discussed with my 10-year-old drawing the little jail cell, art therapy is very effective on adults. Mm-hmm. Play therapy is very effective with adults. So here's what I would challenge you to do. Go back, listen to part 1, part 2, part 3. And again, as Carolyn stated, there's an awareness, there's an acceptance, and then there's action. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with this. If you need to draw yourself a jail cell, and as you identify those thoughts, write those thoughts down, draw some funky looking handcuffs. You can make them look like whatever you want. Color code your thoughts as you think you should, or not must, but would like.
Yes.
And take one at a time. Don't try to tackle all of them and interrogate all of them at once. Take one at a time, get to know the details, get to understand it, and then apply some self-compassion as you're doing that as well. Because these are your thoughts. These aren't other people in this jail cell. This is you, parts of you that you have momentarily locked away until you had time to deal with this crisis situation.
Yeah.
So I look forward to more talks with you. And Carolyn, thank you for being a guest today.
I appreciate it.